Hey there everyone, it's Drew here. So, over the last few years, I've been thinking on and off about Rare's second 3D platformer, Donkey Kong 64. Part of the reason I've been thinking about this is the ongoing eternal wait for a new Donkey Kong game, which is now over 8 years and counting. Even so, with as long as it's been since Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, I still wonder if Donkey Kong will ever venture into the 3D realm again, as DK64 was their first and only venture into that genre. Released in 1999 in between the releases of Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, it was generally well received by critics, with places like IGN calling it Rare's War and Peace, and it went on to be one of the system's most successful games with over 2.3 million copies sold. I remember reading the Nintendo Power Awards for 1999 and seeing the game sweep most every category, although to be fair, it was probably the slowest year for the system. In the decades that have followed since the game's release, however, reception to the game has diminished significantly, with some blaming the game entirely for killing the 3D platformer in the early 2000s. As for me though, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for this game, even with all of its many flaws which I'll be talking about in this video. Like with Banjo-Kazooie, I didn't even know the game existed until I came across it in a Sears kiosk, one of the few places you didn't have to crank your head up 90 degrees just to play a demo. I was instantly charmed with how gorgeous the game is, including that awesome spinning DK room transition. I knew that, in the end, this was a Rare game through and through, and I only wanted more. After getting the game, I played through its lengthy quest for hours and hours, earning that well-deserved 101% completion and absolutely loving the special edition cutscene. As the years have passed though, the game definitely has fallen out of rotation for my regular replays of older games. Banjo-Kazooie is in pretty much every way a better designed and polished game, and Donkey Kong 64 also has a pretty big time commitment. You combine those things together, and the game has been mostly relegated to childhood nostalgia. But, as I've continued to look back in the game and also listen to its soundtrack over the years, I finally felt compelled to give the game another play, this time on the Wii U Virtual Console. Now I will say that the Wii U emulation does have a few tweaks that make it in some ways better than playing it on N64 hardware. For one thing, the frame rate stays almost always at a consistent 30 FPS, which is especially noticeable when using things like the banana warpad in comparison. Character animations are consistently smooth and sharp with no slowdown, and being able to save at any time is always a plus. The Wii U also has fully customizable button layouts, which is very helpful for moves that use the C buttons. The one thing that isn't better, however, is aiming in first-person mode, which is way too sensitive, as is a common challenge with N64 emulation. It makes some sections like destroying the heart of the giant robot fish pretty much impossible, so I might have to play the N64 version again just to get my bearings there. One thing I did find very funny playing the Wii U version is that the minigame Crazy Kong Clamor is pretty much impossible to play at its fastest setting because it was originally designed with slowdown in mind. With none of the slowdown of the original present, you have to have frame-perfect aiming to hit the bananas instead of the Kongs. It really just goes to show that the folks at Rare really knew the ins and outs of their toolkits and how to design gameplay around it. With that all being said, my playthrough of the game this time around was overall a pretty pleasant one, although I do need to get some pretty strong negatives out of the way first. The sheer number of times you have to switch Kongs for the most minute things is almost comical if it weren't so frustrating. Color-coding bananas for each Kong was a mistake. There is one small section in Fungi Forest that really shows all of this very well. So you see a door with a feather ammo trigger. You swap in Tiny Kong to open it. You merrily follow the path of purple bananas, and then for literally no reason, there's another locked door with pineapple triggers. You go back to fetch Donkey Kong, blast it with your pineapple gun, and then a single purple banana remains, mocking you in its solidarity. It's moments like this that make me think Rare designed as much artificial length as possible just from the swapping mechanic. And their playtesters were actually monkeys who only cared about the quantity of bananas. And if it weren't for the good stuff I'm going to be talking about, I probably couldn't even remotely stand the game. But that's just the thing. The good stuff of Donkey Kong 64 is still really, really good. From the very beginning cutscene, the game just oozes so much charm, so much personality, and so much good old-fashioned Rare humor that I can't not recommend the game for at least one basic playthrough. Each of the 5 playable Kong characters is given distinct characteristics, with a full Super Mario 64 inspired basic moveset. Everything from the way they walk, the way they jump, the way they attack, and even in their idle animation it feels unique to each Kong. King K. Rool is larger than life in this game, and he even seems to have tapped into the dark side of the Force. Another thing in the game that is still universally well regarded is its soundtrack by Grant Kirkhope. While Banjo-Kazooie has a much more dynamic soundtrack with its smooth transitions, in terms of music I just like to casually listen to while working, DK64 is just my usual go-to. I frequently made it to the end of a 1-hour loop of the DK Island theme, and so many tracks just have a calm, cool vibe that is very relaxing. The Mermaid theme alone is just breathtaking, and there are a few other pieces of music that evoke such a strong feeling of nostalgia in me. But enough talk about fluff. What about actual gameplay? I've already mentioned how the swapping mechanic does hinder the flow of the game, but a lot of the time when you're just exploring and playing the game as one of the Kong characters, there are a number of great fun moments. A lot of those moments come from all the different moves the Kongs learn by drinking potions from Cranky Kong. Donkey Kong blasts through barrels in the classic country style, Diddy Kong has an awesome, if somewhat janky jetpack, Tiny Kong takes after her sister Dixie and can twirl through the air, and her shrinking ability makes for some very entertaining perspective shifts. Lanky Kong is such a lovable goofball with his inflation enhanced stand abilities, and Chunky Kong is probably the best darn character in the game, and his moves focusing on strength end up being some of the most useful in the game. These moves provide a pretty big variety of gameplay mechanics, and anytime it's not being hindered with character swapping, it really does get a chance to shine. Another high point I wanted to mention are the minecart rides, which are an absolute blast with tricky obstacles and some fantastic animation and lighting effects. It's a shame they only account for 3 of the golden bananas, and a few more would have certainly helped replace the filler stuff. There are also a number of minigames and races that are actually pretty fun, with a few infamous exceptions like Beaver Bother. I even like the race with a giant bug that took me forever as a kid to realize you actually have to hit him at the beginning. I also do like the boss fights, and even though there are a few repeating ones, each fight is still memorable, with one in particular giving me PTSD with its sinking platform. The climactic final battle with King K. Rool is very well done, with each Kong having a chance to shine with their particular skills and bringing him down. I just think that the continuity with the battle is pretty dang hilarious, with K. Rool getting a light stuck on his head at the end of round 2, staying stuck in it through all of round 3, and then finally getting it removed at the beginning of round 4. In terms of levels, some are definitely better than others. The game starts out slightly slow until you find all the Kongs, but then immediately starts to pick up after that. The absolute low point of the game, however, is its 4th world, Gloomy Galleon. Everyone talks about that terrible robot fish, but there is another one that I really dislike this time around. There is a room where you have to use Chunky Kong to carry a ball to a cannon, and then carefully aim a limited number of shots to hit 3 targets. That challenge alone would be so bad if it weren't for the worst place Kasplat in the entire game. Every time I failed at this challenge, the Kasplat would regenerate, and I would have to go kill it again before it could re-retrieve the cannonball. The level in general also feels a lot like you're just blandly swimming through large open waters, but thankfully the game only gets better from there for the most part. One level I have absolutely no complaints about is Creepy Castle. The level lives up to its name, with a dazzling amount of variety in its visuals and music. You explore spooky ballrooms, libraries, catacombs, dungeons, each with very distinct designs. Grant Kirkhope composed 15 tracks alone just for this level, and even included some of his own spooky vocalizations. There's more I could talk about, but in the end, while I certainly wish Rare had made some better design choices with the character swapping mechanic and trimmed a lot of the extra stuff, I really can't call myself a hater of this game. There's just too much of that good old Rare charm for me to dislike it. If I were to give the game a score today, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. If you can tolerate some of its incredibly annoying flaws, you'll find there is a pretty decent amount of fun to be had. I hope this game gets another life on the Nintendo Switch Online service, and that maybe I can finally secure a new N64 controller by then. I'm looking at you, Nintendo. Until next time, this is Drew, the Nostalgia Maniac, signing off.